What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rovardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And last night, the New York Giants dropped the first episode of Hard Knocks on HBO and Max. It was really interesting. I just watched it this morning. Didn't get to watch it last night because I was out with my family celebrating my birthday. Had a whole lot of fun, but got to wake up this morning, watch the New York Giants on Hard Knock. Got to hear Joe Schoen dive into the process of negotiating with Saquon Barkley, the decision-making process that went into allowing him to walk into free agency, and some of the thoughts that they had about Daniel Jones at the beginning of this offseason. Some really interesting stuff and takeaways, and we want to react to it, kind of give our opinions on some of the stuff that we saw in the first episode of Hard Knocks, and this is going to be a weekly thing. I think every Wednesday you could probably expect us to hop on here Wednesday mornings and discuss what we saw on the Tuesday night episode of Hard Knocks for the next several weeks. I think there's 6 episodes in total, and I'm really excited because I think that watching NFL teams from the front office perspective and getting all that behind the scenes stuff, it's really exciting to me. I think it's one of the most intriguing aspects of NFL media and those behind the scene looks at roster construction and building. I find that stuff really fun. So I'm really grateful that we have this for the Giants, and I'm grateful that the Giants dropped it on my birthday. What a nice present that they gave to me. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss the episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what is your initial reaction to the first episode of New York Giants offseason edition of Hard Knocks?
Well, I expected the Giants to be heavily involved in the editing process, and it seems as though they definitely were. We got a couple of nuggets, some value, some clips, some quotes that we obviously are all freaking out about and getting excited about on social media. This guy said this guy said that. Everyone has subjective hearing, in my opinion, when it comes to these clips. Some people will hear that, Joe Schoen loves Daniel Jones and he wants to keep playing with him. He wants him to keep being the primary quarterback. And other people will hear, well, the offensive line was bad and Daniel Jones has one more year left to prove himself. He said, is he going to be our guy for the next 10 years, or is he going to be the guy we have to pivot away from and find somebody else? That's almost what he said verbatim. So, you can have your selective hearing, but at the end of the day, I do feel as though, when you're kind of looking at this Giants team, we have a lot of needs. This team is still rebuilding. I don't think this is like a championship caliber operation just yet, but they're trending in the right direction. He said we have to kind of essentially, draft well, have a good free agency. Obviously, this was really early in the process, this episode, so we've already seen a lot of these things unfold, especially in free agency. He says we have to go into free agency, address the offensive line. He said, verbatim, we had 3 effing practice squad players against Miami, which is when Daniel Jones got the stinger to his neck. So, you think about where this Giants team was, their failures on the offensive line, the fact they went out and got Jermaine Illuminor and they got John Runyon. I do kind of think that when you're looking at this overall offseason up to this point, they addressed the things that he kind of mentioned in this episode, right? The offensive line, they got an offensive playmaker with Malik Neighbors. Now we do know, and we're going to probably find out more information in the next episode when the combine comes around, on the draft, of course, how interested they actually were in drafting a quarterback. They may not give us much information. The Giants may not want to put that much pressure on Daniel Jones. I'm not expecting us to get like a ton of information about like they were about to trade for Drake May, or they love this quarterback. They'll probably be like, we like this player, we think he'd be great, but Malik Neighbors is awesome. I guarantee you it's a Malik Neighbors glaze fest in the next 2 episodes, because that's really what they're going to want to see and what they're going to want to say, how great Neighbors is and how they love Daniel Jones. Like, that's going to be the narrative that they want us to hear. Because think about it, like, if they have the final say, why would they want to put their quarterback in a negative light? Why would they want to show us that they were trying to replace him? Not show us, but show Daniel Jones that he's on the chopping block. And I think the quote itself, that this is his last year. Like, he has to prove that he can be our guy for the next decade, or he can't be. And he said, I know you have a quote that you want to read off in terms of saying something along the lines of, not even Patrick Mahomes could survive behind this offensive line. Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. One thing I do know, Patrick Mahomes survived without 0 receivers last year, and he won a Super Bowl. So I kind of feel as though every team has weaknesses. Mahomes and Daniel Jones are so far apart in talent, you couldn't even see the space between it. You know what I mean? Like, it's so vast. It's like a galaxy away, light years, in terms of talent. So I just don't see that comparison. I know you don't like that one either. I think that there was a lot to take away from this episode in terms of a few key moments, especially the Saquon Barkley stuff, which we'll dive into. But I do think that they reinforced this team enough to give Daniel Jones a chance to succeed. He said it would take a couple of years. They said they wanted to give him a couple of years. This is the time for him to succeed, man. They gave him offensive line support. They gave him a true and tried, not a tried, but a true superstar caliber talent through the draft and neighbors. It's now or never for him, and I think Joe Shane said as much.
Yeah, he absolutely did say as much, but he also did say that he's confident in Daniel Jones. On one token, he was basically saying Daniel Jones has to prove it right now, and we have to be cognizant of his injury history. But on the other side, he was saying we can't give up on him. That is actually an exact quote. He said, quote, "I am not giving up on him. He's under contract for 3 more years," end quote. So Joe Shane still expressing confidence in Daniel Jones, but he also did express a little bit of a worry, I would say, is how I would put it, because throughout the episode, you hear him mention the injury history so many times. He says the ACL. He says he's been injured in 3 of the last 4 years, and that's real. You have to keep that in mind, and you have to protect yourself. So not only was he talking about how the Giants' offensive line was trash last year, and we all know that it was, but he was also talking about how the Giants need to protect Daniel Jones and protect themselves from Daniel Jones potentially not panning out. So I think that it's interesting to see Joe Shane looking at this from both angles. Yes, he said the quote, which was, "Nobody can bleeping, like, could you have bleeping Patrick Mahomes and he wouldn't be able to bleeping win behind that offensive line?" That is a quote from Joe Shane. But at the same time, he did say the injuries, we have to protect ourselves from them. So one side, he's confident in Daniel Jones and he believes in his ability and feels like the Giants have failed him. But on the other side of it, he also feels like Daniel Jones needs to stay healthy or play better and in order to keep his job as the Giants' starting quarterback. So I think it's important for Joe Shane to look at everything from both angles. And he did the same thing with Saquon Barkley in all of the clips that they showed in Hard Knocks. He looked at it from, this is a difference maker. Our owner wants to keep him. John Mara went into Joe Shane's office and said, ideally, I'd like to have him back. But at the same time, he sat down in that meeting with all of his front office executives and said, is it really worth it to invest that money into a running back? And ultimately came to the conclusion that it was not a worthwhile investment. And that was one of my favorite quotes from Hard Knocks. He said, "You're paying Daniel Jones $40 million. It's not to hand the ball off to a $12 million back." And I think that's a really important quote from Joe Shane. And it really does show how much pressure he's placing onto the shoulders of Daniel Jones. First of all, it shows that he's confident that Daniel Jones will open the season healthy. I know at the beginning of the offseason we had some question marks about that. Nobody really has questions about that anymore. Daniel Jones is going to be the starter in week 1. Now we just have to see if he maintains that starting job. But they're putting all of the pressure on his shoulders. They are giving him the keys to the offense. They are no longer running their offense through their running back. They are going to run it through their quarterback. And that's what Joe Shane clearly expressed to his other front office executives in that quote and to all of us watching the Hard Knocks episode. And I think that was the most important quote that was dropped in the episode. You're paying Daniel Jones $40 million. It's not to hand the ball off to a $12 million back. So the Giants ultimately let their $12 million back go to Philadelphia. He's now playing for the Eagles. And instead, they are putting all of the pressure on Daniel Jones and giving him the tools that he needs to succeed through upgrading the offensive line and through adding talent in the receiving core. And I think that you and I are in complete agreement, Alex. This is the way that things should be done here. This is the way that the Giants should be operating the season. They should be asking a lot of Daniel Jones, and they should be asking him to lead this offense rather than hand it off to a very expensive running back. And that's why we're happy about the upgrades that they made on the offensive line. Jermaine Illuminor, John Runyon, we like those signings, and we love the addition of Malik Neighbors. We think that this offense should take a massive step forward, but we also do agree, Alex, that this offense will go as far as Daniel Jones takes it. And I think that's kind of what Joe Shane was communicating right there. How far can Daniel Jones take this offense? If he takes it all the way to the playoffs again, then they can feel confident with him under contract for 3 more years. But if not, if he gets injured, whatever might happen that causes this offense to not meet expectations, it ultimately does rest on the shoulders of Daniel Jones. It's kind of what was communicated by Joe Shane's quotes to me, and I'm sure that you do agree with me, Alex. Joe Shane putting a lot of pressure on Daniel Jones going into his 6th season.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to Saquon Barkley and the situation that's kind of unfolded there, I think that the Giants made the right decision. And, you kind of said it before, the idea that you don't want your $40 million quarterback handing off your $12 million running back. This is the season that Daniel Jones has to be the key and not Saquon, right? This offense cannot lean on Saquon Barkley any longer, and it won't. And the reason for that is pretty simple. you don't want to be leaning on the most injury-prone position of football, because the second that player goes down, which inevitably they will, and Saquon did almost every season pick up knocks and injuries, you lose your whole offensive scheme, right? You lose your whole game plan, because the game plan was always Saquon Barkley gets the ball, draws defenses in, and then we try to capitalize on guys focusing on it. So, when you think about kind of how this offense is going to operate, it's about to be Daniel Jones's game, man. It's about to be his offense. This was Saquon Barkley's offense, and that's how they always, all the commentators, all the big networks, always suggested it as Saquon Barkley's offense, not Daniel Jones's offense, but Saquon's offense. Now it's DJ's offense. He's got to be the one to step up, make the plays, do the damage, and find the receivers and be a great quarterback. It can't be Saquon Barkley rushes 60 yards for a touchdown and bails us out, having not scored any points through 3 quarters. You know what I mean? Like that no longer can be the case. It's going to be Daniel Jones scanning the field, finding his reads, going through his progressions, finding open hands, getting that ball to his best playmakers. That's going to be the offense moving forward. Can he do that? That's the question. And I think Joe Schoen kind of referenced it in saying nobody could do it with the offensive line that we had. And I do agree. I do think that to a degree, that offensive line was so bad that we were never going to see the best version of anybody. We saw some decent moments from Tyrod Taylor, but even he got injured because he was running for his life every single play. So, it was never sustainable, even though Tyrod looked better than Daniel Jones at times. Even Tommy DeVito had his moments. None of those guys could stay healthy because at the end of the day, you're running for your life. You're taking too many hits. And if you're a smaller guy, like a quarterback, taking hits from defensive linemen, edge rushers, linebackers, you're going to get hurt at some point. And we saw that with pretty much everybody that played quarterback for us. So I do understand that. I do think that was a priority for the Giants. They addressed it. Now it comes down to, can Evan Neal take a step forward? Is Illuminor going to play right tackle? Is John Running going to start at left guard? Now we ask ourselves those questions. So I do believe that at the moment we've trended in the better direction, adding Neighbors' key offensive line pieces, and I think that they made the right positional value decisions in terms of letting Saquon go. He signs a monster deal with the Philadelphia Eagles, who could afford to do it, right? They have a great offensive line, great receivers, quality quarterback. Why not add the last piece of the puzzle, a superstar running back? The Giants have bad offensive line until proven otherwise, not a great receiver unit until proven otherwise, not a great quarterback until proven otherwise. Why do you need a superstar running back, as a key part of that equation? So I do think that ultimately was the right choice for this team in terms of long-term prospects. And you need cost efficiency across the board. Neighbors is not making over $10 million on average for the first 4 years of his career. So that's really where you're going to find that value if you're the Giants. Now, he kind of listed off a couple of running backs there in terms of these are the guys we think we can get good value in week 2 of free agency. They end up signing Devin Singletary. Do you think that was the right decision? Do you think that was the move that they should have made? Do you think that was the plan all along, to kind of sidestep overspending at running back and then reinvesting in offensive line receiver? I imagine you agree with that sentiment as well.
Yeah, of course I agree with that. I do find it interesting with the Saquon Barkley discussions and the discussions about signing a running back that the Giants talked a lot about wave 2 of free agency, those running backs who would be available in the second week, and then did go out and sign Devin Singletary very early in the offseason period. They also talked about a few other guys. Their reported interest in Tony Pollard was absolutely legitimate. They definitely did have an interest in him, and they made that very clear in Hard Knocks. And also their interest in Zach Moss was made apparent in the Hard Knocks episode. They were interested in maybe signing him because he had a lot of versatility as a receiver is one of the things that they mentioned, but they preferred to go with Devin Singletary because they felt like he was a very effective one-cut runner and that he could just pick up 30 yards for them. Again, kind of reinforcing the sentiment that they want their running back to just run, fall forward, gain yards, and they want their quarterback to be the dynamic piece in the offense along with his wide receivers. So I thought that was interesting. Another interesting thought that was expressed in the Hard Knocks episode, the Giants talked a lot about potentially tagging and trading Saquon Barkley, even though very early on in the episode and in the discussions, Joe Schoen said that it's not realistic and not something that we probably can do. A lot of the executives seemed really interested in doing it. Like a lot of the other guys in the Giants building kept bringing up this idea of tagging and trading Saquon Barkley, but at the end of the day, they all felt like they probably wouldn't be able to get anything worthwhile in a trade return for Barkley, so they just let him walk in free agency and invested that money elsewhere. And I thought that one of the best quotes that Shane had was, we have so many holes on this roster, and I'm paraphrasing this quote because I don't have it pulled it up. He said basically, we have so many holes on this roster. Why would we invest $12 million into a running back? And I thought that was the best point because there were so many holes. He had just gone on a long tangent about protecting Daniel Jones and how they need more investments into the offensive line. He talked about how they need more playmakers to help Daniel Jones in the receiving game. And then he also just went ahead and said, listen, all those holes that we need to address, why would we put it all into a 27-year-old running back with an injury history? And his age was also a big talking point. Like, they compared him to Josh Jacobs and how Josh Jacobs was nearly 2 years younger, didn't have the same injury history, and that's why they felt like they couldn't give Saquon Barkley that contract. A lot went into this decision. There was a lot of decision-making, or a lot of a process in this decision-making to let Saquon Barkley go, and I think that's important for Giants fans to understand. Like, this wasn't a situation where the Giants didn't know what they had with Saquon Barkley or didn't know what they wanted to do on offense this upcoming season. They had a plan in place, and they meticulously discussed and decided on Saquon Barkley's future. They even had John Mara walk in and give his opinion. He said, absolutely, I want to bring him back, but you have the opportunity to do whatever you want. And I think that's the next point that I want to make, Alex. Joe Schoen is running the show. John Mara is not secretly shadowing over him and running the show for him and calling the shots and making the decisions in the front office. I've been saying this for a very long time, Alex, and I know that you and I have gotten into it with each other on the show, and I've gotten annoyed with you when you've tried to express that you feel like John Mara is secretly running the show from the background. I've always said, no, the GMs run the show. The Odell Beckham Jr. trade in 2019 happened because the GMs of the Giants run the show. John Mara wouldn't have wanted to see that happen. Plenty of other things throughout the past have happened that were clearly GM decisions, and I think that Hard Knocks is giving us that behind-the-scenes look and showing us that it truly is the general manager, Joe Schoen, running the show. Yes, he leans on John Mara sometimes to get his opinion and ask what he would like to see the team do, but that doesn't mean that's what the team is going to do, because John Mara made it very clear he wanted Saquon Barkley back. Joe Schoen said, that's probably not going to happen, John. We're going to do what's best for this football team. And that is very important, that John Mara is letting the football guys do the football stuff. He's stepping back and letting the guys that he hired to do those jobs actually do those jobs. And I think that is a really important takeaway. Alex, what are your thoughts on that, kind of the idea that John Mara isn't super involved? Like, yes, he's involved, but he's not running the show. This is very much Joe Schoen's football team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that he shouldn't be running the show. If you want to have a good team, you want to have a team that can win a Super Bowl, you need to let the guys that you hire do their job. John Mara is not a professional general manager. He is an owner, right? He has extraordinary bias when it comes to making decisions, which is why he wanted to keep Saquon Barkley. That was ultimately would have been a bad decision to keep Saquon Barkley. And listen, Joe Schoen said it like, what did he say? He said, the whole Saquon Barkley situation took 10 years off my life. Is that what he said? Exactly. I mean, listen, that situation was extremely difficult to maneuver around for a lot of reasons. Two reasons mainly. He was the Giants' offense, and the fan base loved him. How do you get rid of a guy that represents most of your offensive production and is loved and adored, and half the fans in MetLife are wearing his jersey? You know what I mean? How do you get rid of a guy like that? Well, it takes a really tough brand of GM to say, this guy is bringing more cost to us, and it's not sustainable to rely on him to be our primary contributor on offense, right? Long term, in the position that we're in, the team, if the Giants had the Eagles roster or another roster that was really well built and that had a strong foundation, you could justify it. But right now, you can't. And I think Joe Schoen is paid to make those difficult decisions and take the 10 years off his life to ultimately execute, right? John Mara comes into his office and says something like, I'd love to find a way to keep him. And Joe Schoen says, I just don't think it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what you hire Joe Schoen to do. I appreciate the fact that he actually made that decision and that he didn't, take what his boss is telling him and run with it. I think Dave Gettleman probably would have just been like, yeah, whatever, let's do that. You know what I mean? Like, I think Dave Gettleman was out of his mind half the time. And I think that, he was buddies with Mara. And I don't know how, I'm just assuming things, but I have no idea how that relationship worked at all. But I do like the fact that Joe Schoen is pushing back. And I do like the fact that he's making decisions that he thinks are in the best interest of the organization and not the best interest of his owner being happy. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if the Giants are really good for the next 5-6 years, John Mara is not going to care that Saquon Barkley's on Philadelphia. So John Mara's not going to care that Daniel Jones is not on the team anymore if that's the direction they want to go in. He's going to care that the Giants are winning playoff games. The Giants are winning games. The Giants going into Arlington, beating Jerry Jones, and John Mara sitting in Jerry Jones's box, laughing at him because the Giants just beat their ass away in Texas. That's what he's going to be happy about. Not Saquon Barkley, not Daniel Jones, nothing else but winning football games against other teams. And that's what the Giants want. If that's what the Giants want, that's what they have to do. They have to make these difficult decisions. It's part of the process. And like, I don't want anyone to get it confused here. Like, I'm not being pessimistic or negative. I'm actually being very positive right now in the sense that I think this team is making the tough decisions to be winners, not losers, and staying exactly in the sandpit that they've been slowly walking in for the last 5 years, man. Like, we've been just sitting still in quicksand and drowning. We're starting to kind of claw our way out and making the difficult choices and decisions to shed some of the dead weight, to shed the reliance on an injury-prone running back, to shed the reliance on positional value that we've been misallocating for years. We're finally clawing our way out of a situation that was financially bogging us down. We have a good salary cap situation now. If the Giants want to move up from Daniel Jones next year, the money's going to be a drop in the bucket long term. You know what I mean? Like, we're okay in terms of that. You get a rookie quarterback on a rookie contract, that $20 million that you have to pay Daniel Jones in dead money that you could spread out over the course of 2 years, it's going to be nothing. No one's going to care about that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I sit right now. And I think that we are trending in a better direction compared to the past. But in no way do I feel we are going to be successful. We have a lot of work to do, but I see signs of improvement. And that's all I've been hoping for as a Giants fan, because we've seen what negative, what bad, what failure looks like over and over and over again. And it finally seems like at least we're trending in a direction where it makes sense logically.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there. Very passionate, fiery rant from you there, Alex, and I really enjoyed every second of it. And you do, again, make some very good points about the direction that the Giants are heading in. And I think we could feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more confident in this direction, especially after getting a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look here at Joe Schoen's operations and the New York Giants front office operations throughout this offseason. And like I said, I'm really excited for these upcoming episodes. We know that we have draft episodes in the coming weeks. We have combine episodes, and then I think it probably ends with OTAs and minicamp. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff, and I think that some of the thoughts and ideas that we saw expressed in the Giants front office in the first episode were really interesting. I'm excited to see where that goes in the next couple of episodes. I know that they're going to dive into the Brian Burns trade pretty heavily, and we should get to see some of an inside look at them interviewing some draft prospects that they did draft and that they didn't draft. Maybe, I know we've heard a lot about Andrew Phillips and how he blew everyone away with his combine interviews. Maybe we'll get some looks at that. Maybe we'll get some behind-the-scenes footage of that combine interview, and I think that would be really exciting. In addition, we're going to get some behind-the-scenes looks at Malik Neighbors and what he did during the pre-draft process that really impressed the Giants. So I'm really excited for that. And of course, like I said, we're going to be reacting to every episode of the Giants Hard Knocks right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.